Hello and welcome back to the Thought Leader Recruit podcast. I'm Sam Violet, and today I'm joined by Rick Coluccio, SVP of Business Development at Raymond George. Rick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to have you here. So, Rick, for people who don't already know you, what does Raymond George actually do, and what's your day-to-day role?
Yeah, absolutely. So Raymond George Consultancy is an international rec to rec, which started from two partners in Brighton, England. One of those two partners married a Canadian, moved over to the province of Ontario, which is where I reside in Toronto. Personally, I am downtown. I think, employee number one, boots on the ground Canadian person. But so the markets that we still cover to this day are going to be UK, Canada, and US. I was part of the effort to spearhead the US market for Raymond George. And pretty straightforward, traditional rec to rec on paper in terms of the orders that we take. So we do both contained and contingent search. But I would say that we have a pretty progressive approach to doing it. We have a podcast not unlike this one, although ours is also a live event. So I feel like it's a lot about fostering community. It's very much a networking ecosystem, sort of international ecosystem of people in staffing is our approach to getting to know people off page in order to better matchmake in the rec to rec world.
Yeah, love that. And you mentioned we talked before you were headhunted into rec to rec world. What was your first reaction to that, and what convinced you to make the jump?
Yeah, so I guess to put a little meat on the bone there, I came into staffing rather late. So I've been in staffing for 12 years, but I am not a young man. So I got into it like in my 30s, staffing. So up until then, I was predominantly mainly working in the music business, and I had taken some corporate jobs to help fund my record label or my bands that I was in. So I did tech sales for a while for a big tech sales company. I used to be an on-air radio personality and radio station producer when I was like 19 years old for a few years. So I've done a few other things, but I got into staffing when I moved from Montreal to Toronto and fell in love with it. You know what I mean? I did not expect it late in life as it was to find something that I really enjoyed. So I was headhunted into staffing in the first place. I was at that agency for years, but that was my first agency, and I was happy I wasn't looking. So when I got headhunted to rec, the big thing that caught my attention is they were like, you sir are being underpaid and undervalued maybe, and there's other fish in the sea, and sort of like really were able to guide me as to what the options were out there in a way that I would not have been able to glean on my own, save for interviewing with every agency out there, right? So it was super eye-opening as to what the options were out there. That was the initial conversation. But in speaking to my recruiter, Luke, who's still awesome to this day, and we keep in touch quite often, like we talk all the time still now. But then he introduced me over to Julie Robinson, who's the owner of Raymond George, one of the two partners who had moved over to Canada, as potentially working in rec to rec, right? And I hadn't even considered it. It's not a very popular option in Toronto. Like, there's not a lot of Canadian rec to recs. You'll get there's a couple that exist, but like 2, 3, it's a handful. But a lot of times when you speak to rec, they'll be from the UK, right? Maybe the US, but usually the UK. So it wasn't an option that I even realized existed. I remember asking, like, is this a thing? Like, do agencies actually pay you fees? And yeah, it was fully won over on one meeting. It was one of those things where it was like, when I met Julie in particular, Luke was awesome, but when I met Julie in particular, it's like that scene in Wolf of Wall Street where Leo is like, what's that?
Which one?
Yeah, we'll have to really be specific, eh? It was
Yeah,
not the midget tossing scene. It was
no.
not. We won't go through the list of the ones it
No.
wasn't. But no, where Jonah Hill's just kind of like, hey man, I see you in my building. You drive a great car. Like, what do you make? And he shows him
Oh,
what
I
he
love
makes in
that
a
bit.
month. He's like, right? It's like, if you can prove that then I will quit my job and work for you. And that's what it was like. I met Julie. All the things she was talking about, just sort of about the international perspective on recruitment and whatever. I was like, you know what? Yeah, cool. I'm gonna quit my job. I want to work for you. I want to learn all this stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's an amazing story. And so, what's one skill from that earlier life that's kind of still gives you the edge in business development today?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it's funny when I started playing shows, because again, I'm not old, but when I was as a musician, right? Like, when I started playing shows, I lived in the suburbs. I didn't have any cool friends or whatever. I had a bit of a music industry family. Like, my uncle had been in bands and stuff like that, but I didn't know anybody out there, right? So I was cold calling venue bookers out of the phone book, literally just looking at the venues that existed in Montreal where I grew up and cold calling them out of the phone book and being like, can we come give you our demo tape? And that was the beginning of what ended up being like, how do you get other shows? We got to meet other bands and go up to them as strangers. Hey, this is us. Here's our demo tape. Do you guys want to play a show together? And then that mushroomed out to different cities and then to having a record label and whatever. So it's just from being out there, meeting people, having to deal with rejection and just cold talking to people has been unbelievably valuable. And the creativity that comes with having to just sit down and go like, how are we going to meet people? There wasn't like a LinkedIn of bands. There wasn't even MySpace when I was doing this, right? It was the late 90s. So having to come up with it and just sort of meet people with nothing out there was very difficult. And I did it with to a fair degree of success, if I do say so myself, over the years. So yeah, unbelievably valuable in recruitment and business development, period.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as I said before, I come from the music world as well, and what we
Yeah.
used to do, I used to have mixtapes. I used to go around to all the bars, all the clubs in my local area with a mixtape and say, "Yeah, it's a mixtape. You know, have a listen to it. If you're interested, let me know. I'll come down and play with you." You know, that was it. That's all we could do. Yeah,
That's it, right? And I think that the courage that it takes to do that
yeah,
physically, face to face, and this is like your passion project too, right? So the rejection is the stakes are
yeah,
much higher. It's not someone else's company or anything. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Had a lot of knockbacks in my time for sure, but yeah, makes you stronger, I think. So yeah, I can see that definitely transitioning. And yeah, Raymond George has really shifted focus from the UK to North America. How did that transition unfold, and why the East Coast and Texas?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I don't think it was like anybody sat down in a virtual boardroom and said like, "Hey, we're going to start focusing on the U.S. instead of the U.K." The U.K. is still trucking along. Jenny Finch, who is the partner who's still in the UK, does a lot of great business there. But COVID was really the big change, like lockdowns and so on. When I started the job, even though we were in Canada and we were remote from anywhere, I was still going face to face with Julie and on my own to meet candidates and clients and whatever here in Toronto as a predominant thing, and occasionally working the US market. But COVID shifted the game drastically, right? If you're just going to be doing video calls because that's the only thing you can do to really meet a person, or at least I hope people were doing video calls and not just like emails or god knows what in mails and then sending them out. But if you're only meeting people virtually, then what's to stop you, really, right? So it then became more like, okay, strategically, what are markets that we like and why? What are markets that we've used to or had success with? And I had done a lot of music in New York. I had done tech sales. I was on the New York team for an American value added reseller called PC Mall Mac Mall for years. And I was voluntarily on the New York team. I did well there. Like it's just familiar territory for me. And I was also like, if lockdowns ever lift again, it's feasible to go physically there on a semi-regular basis from Toronto and meet clients and candidates. So New York was sort of the like a passion project for me because I, again, knew it fairly well. And it happened to bear fruit, right? So that leads to some other obvious things like, life sciences were doing really well at the time. So, okay, let's look at Boston. Let's look at, markets where life sciences are big. That led us to Charlotte, Raleigh area, which was, had its ups and downs and waves and whatever. But for whatever reason, it seems like a lot of the research that was driving a lot of the clients that we were dealing with that wanted to open other offices, or just in general, the research about the recruiting industry was all pointing to Texas. They're like, Texas is the place of the future, like because of all kinds of trade that may happen with Mexico. Obviously, politically, things have shifted. But regardless, that was kind of where the research was heading. So Texas became on the map. And that's kind of it, right? It's just when you could just throw a dart and be like, I'll do video calls to people in Singapore if that's where the money is, I
Yeah,
suppose, right? If we have a viable market there, it led us down this path.
yeah, makes sense. And yeah, it's still a candidate driven market in many sectors. How are you helping your clients make their brand and offers stand out?
Yeah, and I mean it's a loaded thing. It's such a strange market post COVID. So there was post COVID, which was weird for one reason. Then there's post COVID now, where it is kind of a mess. I feel like it's hard to call it a traditional candidate market or a traditional client market. But I do agree with you that clients do need to stand out. I don't know that they all realize that coming into it, though. I think that because recruiting recruiters, so many people were laid off and let go or are just on the market that it's like their inboxes are flooded with resumes of decent looking people. And so I don't know that they realize that if they want to attract top talent, you still absolutely need to stand out. And another thing that's happened, the answer to the question is multifold, right? There's a lot of people who've gone off and started their own agencies as well. So there are a lot of startups. So there's a lot of people out there who are offering things like work from anywhere. We'll give you equity in the company, just promising the world to try to attract top talent. But there's nothing really behind it. It's a high risk proposition. It's really hard to differentiate which ones are actually going to land and grow and become amazing. And then from the bigger companies, there's a lot of, I don't want to call it misdirection, but it's sort of like they'll let go of a bunch of people and then replace two, like 10 people with two, and sort of give them a decent package and make it seem like this is the stable option, but you got to come back into the office and so on. So it feels like the differentiator idea is less universal than ever. It's so individualistic that I think it really is about, on a case by case basis, speaking to one recruiter who's a top performer after another and hoping that they're open enough to have a real conversation about what makes them tick, what they like and don't like about the role, about recruitment, what they want for the future, and then just genuinely trying to matchmake. And in some cases, getting outside of the speeds and feeds, right? That you hear in the branding sort of lingo, and getting to know the person and on both sides of the fence, and being like, you guys are like-minded. You guys can bring things to the table for each other, which is a lot about the ethos that we have at Raymond George in general, which is what I was trained by Julie and Jenny. And what I love about Rec to Rec, because we're peer recruitment, we can get a lot more granular about the job because we know the job. Normally, you don't know the job as well as the experts that you're recruiting. So it's a whole different ballpark, right? We can get really down into the weeds and hopefully get people to open up, form real relationships, real friendships, real business relationships that are lasting, and get outside of the like, well, I'd like to work 3 days in the office instead of 4, and I want to work for, and I'd like an extra 5% on the commission, and I need 10K more in the, like that's almost irrelevant in recruitment, in my opinion. If the right people are working together, they can have a pretty profound influence on each other and even on the process of a firm that's, let's say, a boutique firm. So I feel like it's a lot more nebulous, but it's much more about the person on both sides of the coin. So if an employer wants to stick to that script, this is our value prop, these are our top 3 points, no matter how well thought they are in a marketing meeting or whatever else, it's not enough, right? Unless they're willing to really open up and be flexible and allow us to get to know who they are as people, really, and what their goals are, and then the whole bigger picture. They're not going to get that dream team. They're not going to find that lightning in the bottle.
Yeah, for sure. And from your side, what's the biggest mistake recruitment companies make when trying to hire strong talent?
I guess it related to what I was saying too, is to just try to do a paint by numbers approach, right? Like just sort of being like, this is what's worked in the past, so we're going to look for a carbon copy of that person or a carbon copy of myself or whatever, right? Not just being open to will versus skill, for example, but beyond will. It's like people express themselves differently. They bring different things to the table. Seeing that value and seeing where different kind of pieces could fit together, and being open themselves and not coming into it being like, I know it works. We have this closed vision of it. I think that's a really big mistake in today's market. If you want to build a team that works well together, you can't just do it in abstraction like that and come in pre-decided as to what the fit's going to be.
Yes, for sure. Makes sense. And tech's moved obviously so fast recently. AI, remote first systems, recruiter enabled platforms. Are firms keeping up with it when it comes to building modern teams?
I mean, no, but I don't blame them.
Oh, yeah,
How could
crazy.
you?
Yeah.
I think I've actually listened to a bunch of episodes of this podcast, Sam, and I think it's great. I think you have some great guests on here, and I think that they're very, very different one from the next, but they all said the same thing, almost in the same wording, and I agree with it, which is that recruitment is broken. Hiring is broken. You hear the word broken a lot. And we're talking about that not in a rec to rec context necessarily, but just in general, right? Sort of, the whole of the Western world, let's say, which is the markets that I talk about and that your clients, your guests were talking about. And I think that all of the tech that's coming out, if anything, it just highlights those pieces because each tool is trying to fix one particular broken thing. I don't think it's possible to keep up with all of them. But what I'm hoping is that it is at least opening up the conversation to stop just looking at our next goal that we need to hit and our next marker that we need to hit, and start thinking a little bit outside the box about, like, okay, so how do we rethink this? How do we make it a little more efficient and or effective? I want to make that distinction, actually. Not efficient, but effective, right? Efficiency is just, looking at max profit for time. I don't think that that's the whole of the situation, right? I think we want to be effective about placing the right people in the right jobs and so on. So I feel like that shift in focus, I think, is slowly gaining traction among business owners, because how can you be efficient when you have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow
Yeah,
or what
yeah,
tools will matter, right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly that. And yeah, keeping on the AI subject, are you using much of it, Raymond George, yet? And if so, what's been the most useful so far?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been a journey because of wanting to be at the forefront as Rec to Rex. We try a lot of tools. We try a lot of tools, and we have a lot of people who approach us to talk to us about tools or to demo tools to us, even to try to get us to sell them, or not sell them exactly, but you know what I mean, refer people over to them on their behalf, right? So it's years now of constant AI tools, and I will say that we tried a lot of them. I don't necessarily want to list the ones that we stopped using and why, because I think that it depends on your process. I don't want to, discourage people from trying tools out. I think that it's a great exercise, but I think that, the sort of note taker recorders, I think, have become a standard. Who wants to have a million calls and have to type everything into your ATS anymore? I mean, that's just, I think if you're not using a note taker, there's lots of great free ones out there. Fathom is one that we used for a while. That's free. That's excellent. So I would highly advise that. I think that there was a very quick tipping point for two types of tools, which we no longer really use. One is the content generation tools out there, like the ones that either help you write AI posts, or purportedly, like, you could give them a whole bunch of your interests, right? And then they'll write posts in your voice and things that they think that your listeners want to hear about, or readers want to read about. And then you write like a million blogs, right? Because that's what people have time to do, is they have time to read more blogs from you. Like, I think it's a little bit of a navel gazing thing that we sort of saw a tipping point on. And I mean, I think that there's also the sequencing tools, so many different sequencing tools. Sequenced outreach is people can sniff it out a mile away now, right? So it's like, if you're gonna put the amount of effort in to make your sequence undetectable, you might as well just not use a sequencing tool, almost, at least not an email sequencing tool or like static sequencing tools. So yeah, there's AI that we use for sure. Like, I'll use AI to help edit video clips from the podcast that we do, for example. I don't know if you're doing the same thing, Sam, but
Yeah.
super time saver,
Mhm.
right? But having the AI do it without assisting is weird. Like, it chooses strange points and whatever. So I feel like a lot of the tools are imperfect. And I mean, like, always looking to take things off your plate so that you're only doing quote unquote money making activities. Something you hear a lot when people talk about AI. And I see why, and I get it. But this is another skill from back in my music days that I think is becoming useful for me, right? In music, we went through this as well. If you were a guitar player, you'd have to, if you wanted to play the things that you had in your head, you'd have to get to a certain skill level in playing. But there are so many tools out there that you can obviously just cut, paste, whatever, and not necessarily become, if you have access to those young enough, you don't necessarily become a great player, right? You get records out quicker. But what doesn't happen is your ideas don't change. They don't evolve. You don't go through the difficult work of becoming a good player. And that actually changes you. If you were to have the discipline to play scales every day and become a better player, your tastes change, you grow and evolve as a person. I think taking all the grunt work away from you and just focusing on what we consider to be money making activities may seem good in the short term. What you're doing is you're robbing yourself of the growth that you get from doing more difficult and mundane things. So we also have to be careful that we're not using tools to write for us all the time, because guess what? Your writing skills are going to become garbage at some point then, right? If you don't use it, you lose it, and you're definitely not going to get better. So I think that the huge reward from putting in all the grunt work of playing scales as a guitar player is, at the end of the day, at the end of a few years, you're a sick player, right? You might have fewer albums out, but who cares? Right? It's effectiveness versus efficiency. You could efficiently put out a million records, but you'll never be a great player. And I think that it's a danger zone that we're in right now with AI tools, where you could just like only have chats with people and never do anything hard ever, and say, "Hey, I'm only doing money making things. I'm so smart." But for how long?
Yeah, that's such a good point. That's a really, really good point. We are in danger of that happening, aren't we? That you had, they're not improving, are they? You're not doing them as much. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting take. It really is.
And it's scary.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
it
scary for
is.
me because the temptation is there. Like, I don't want to become
Yeah,
terrible at doing a lot of the things that I got good at from necessity.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. And, yeah, I saw a stat recently. It's 40% of 42% of agencies now maintain active talent communities, not just kind of passive databases. Are you seeing that trend build across your clients at all?
I don't know if I'm seeing it as a trend. I think a lot of people ask recruiters or full desk, like, in the States you've got your like just recruiters who are 180 desk, or full desk recruiters, or just salespeople, different versions of that question, meaning like, how do you engage with passive talent? How do you keep them engaged and nurture that? But there have only been a few agencies who really focus on value driven ecosystem of people that they nurture, that they give them some sort of value that isn't just, hey, I have a job for you right now. But I do think that mixed with advanced personal branding and social media marketing sort of techniques on a recruiter to recruiter basis, individuated to the person, I think are where it's all going. So I hope that it gains ground, but I almost feel like in the advent of AI agents that are out there that can screen people, if you aren't trying to form real relationships with potential clients, candidates, and not just pitching them a job, but keeping them having some sort of value to have that relationship, and keeping an active network of your target people around through those kinds of techniques, really in-depth personal branding and whatever content. I have a weekly podcast with panel discussions and all this other stuff, among other things, though. And I'm just a naturally curious person. I like talking to people. I like keeping in touch with them, right? So for me, it's a bit natural, like nurturing a fan base if you're in a band, or if you're a label, keeping people apprised of what's going on with your label. It's another skill set, right, that comes into play, especially on the social aspect of it. But I actually think that a lot of people have actually spun out of thinking that way, at least in North America, and are thinking more down the efficiency standpoint. How can we get bigger numbers, bigger numbers, bigger numbers, bigger, better numbers, tools, outsource labor to spend less money? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think that it depends where it's coming from, like what you're intending to do by outsourcing your labor to save costs. And why are you using AI tools? Is it to write all your content? Then you will probably get replaced by an AI fully, right? Like, it's weird to go halfway and then be like, for sure, we'll definitely still have a job in the future. So anyway, I wish people were thinking more along those lines. And I think that that's the future of recruitment, is fully having relationship driven networks between human beings who get to know each other a little bit more than what's on the page.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That's brilliant. And for our audience, how can they find out a bit more about yourself and connect with you and find out a bit more about Raymond George?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can come to us at raymondgeorge.agency, which is just the agency website. By all means, connect with me on LinkedIn, or our LinkedIn page. We're all over a lot of socials, but probably the biggest, most loudest, noisiest thing that I do is the Recruiting EQ podcast, which was supposed to be called the Rec podcast, okay?
Okay.
REQ. But then the thing is, when you say that, all AI generated words spell it RWECK.
All right.
Welcome to the Rec podcast. So it's Recruiting EQ podcast. It's every Wednesday at noon EST. It's a live event on LinkedIn. Feel free to join us, or you can get it on anywhere that you get your podcasts.
Thanks so much, Rick. It's been a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. And yeah, let's keep in touch and speak soon.
Thanks, Sam. Really appreciate it, man. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.